Tonight, we explore a true story from the unseen side of our digital world. It began in the final months of 2009, when a single, unfamiliar word was discovered, buried deep in Google's code: Aurora. It was the first quiet signal of an operation so sophisticated, it would force the company to question its very soul, and so patient, it would rewrite the rules of the entire digital world. We will journey into the quiet, digital shadows of this event. We will travel from the first faint signal in a holiday log file to the high-level, closed-door meetings where a single philosophical debate would change the map of the internet. We will observe how a perfect digital key was forged, and we will follow the trail to the digital library where the blueprints of our modern world are kept. Our story begins, as these things so often do, not with an explosion, but with a quiet, almost imperceptible note in the final, peaceful months of 2009. The keepers of the code. In the final months of 2009, the digital presence of Google was not merely a website. It had become a universe unto itself, a sprawling, humming city of information, tended by some of the most dedicated minds of a generation. Its digital corridors were quiet, orderly, and unimaginably vast, a testament to a new kind of human ingenuity. It was a city that never slept, with avenues of data spanning continents, its foundations resting in massive, climate-controlled buildings. These data centers, larger than city blocks, were the tangible homes for the intangible. The trillions of index pages, the countless messages, the maps of the world, and the collective queries of a planet. Google had been online for over a decade, evolving from a simple search box into an intricate part of daily life. For many, its simple white page was the internet itself, the starting point for any digital journey. This scale was not just a matter of size, but of profound complexity. The code itself was a living document, a tapestry woven from billions of lines, with new threads being added every single day by thousands of engineers. A single change, a minor adjustment to an algorithm, could ripple through the entire system in an instant, subtly altering the way information was presented to millions of people. The company's ambition was to organize the world's information, and in doing so, it had created one of the most complex information structures ever built by humankind. To build and maintain this city, Google sought out and hired many of the most talented minds in the world. The company was renowned for its difficult, abstract interview questions, designed to find not just skill, but a specific kind of intellectual curiosity. These were the new architects, the civil engineers of the digital age. They were not just employees, they were custodians of an idea. They believed in the power of information, in the logic of data, and in the profound challenge of building systems that could operate at a global scale, reliably, every second of every day. This philosophy was woven into the company's culture. The central offices felt more like a university campus than a corporate headquarters. Engineers were given time to pursue their own projects, fostering an environment of constant, quiet innovation. They were drawn to the challenge, the sheer, unprecedented scale of it all. To work at Google in 2009 was to be on the frontier, building the pathways and structures that the rest of the world would one day use. It was a culture that operated on a deep, foundational belief in its own mission, encapsulated in its famous motto, "Don't be evil." It was a simple phrase, but it served as a guiding principle, a North Star for a company navigating a new and uncharted world. Security in this environment played a vital and unique role. It was not a series of gates and walls, not a fortress built to repel a known enemy. It was thought of more as a function of health, an intrinsic part of the system's biology, an immune system. Or perhaps, more accurately, it was like a team of master gardeners tending a vast, intricate botanical garden. Before any new piece of code, any new pathway or structure was added to the public-facing garden, it was first grown in a quiet, isolated greenhouse. There, a dedicated team of security engineers, acting as digital architects, would review the blueprints. They would test the configurations, checking for any flaw in the logic, any weakness in the design. It was a process akin to checking that every window in a new skyscraper was perfectly sealed, that every door hinge was sound, that every load-bearing wall was placed exactly as the plans required. They would simulate wind and weather, seeing how the new addition held up under stress. Only when it was deemed perfectly sound, perfectly integrated with the whole, was it allowed to be planted in the living ecosystem. This was a process of meticulous care, of prevention rather than reaction. The goal was to ensure that everything that grew in this digital garden was healthy and strong from the very beginning. The teams, known as site reliability engineers, were a new breed, part developer, part systems administrator. Their mandate was to create systems that were not just secure, but inherently stable and reliable. They were the ones who wrote the automation that kept the city humming, the ones who ensured that a failure in one part of the world would be instantly and seamlessly compensated for by another, with no one on the outside ever noticing the difference. The security was layered, like a series of gardens, one within the other, each with its own caretakers and its own specific climate. And alongside these gardeners and architects, there were the watchmen, in quiet rooms, illuminated by the glow of monitors. Teams of security analysts and technicians observed the network 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They were not watching for attacks in the conventional sense. They were more like astronomers in a silent observatory, watching the night sky. They watched the constant rhythmic flow of data, the predictable currents of information moving between continents. They learned the normal patterns, the tidal ebb and flow of a billion users, the daily rhythms of a planet logging on and logging off. Their job was to know the sky so well that they could spot anything new, a light that should not be there, a star moving in an unfamiliar path, a faint, subtle signal in the vast cosmic static. They were searching for anomalies, for deviations from the established, beautiful order. They looked for a user appearing in 2 countries at once. They looked for a piece of data moving to a part of the network it had never visited before. They listened for a single whisper of a command in a system designed for clear, open communication. Every process, every connection, every login was a point of light in their digital sky. This was the state of the digital city, a living monument to logic and order, tended by its loyal keepers. The systems hummed, the data flowed, and the watchmen observed their quiet skies. But in the cold of that holiday season, a new and unfamiliar light was beginning to appear in the constellation, a pattern so subtle that at first it was almost mistaken for the background noise of the universe itself. The signal in the static, As the year drew to a close, a quiet holiday mood settled over the world. The physical campuses of Google, usually bustling with the energy of thousands, grew still. Hallways were empty, meeting rooms dark. But the digital city, the vast, humming universe of information, never rested. And so, the watchmen remained at their posts, the small, dedicated holiday teams observing the constant, silent flow of data. It was during this time, in the deep, peaceful quiet of late December 2009, that a faint, unusual signal began to appear. It was not a sudden alarm, not a flashing light, but a subtle dissonance in the immense, rhythmic hum of the system, like a single, unexpected note in a vast and sleeping orchestra. The end of the year is a time of rest and reflection. In operation centers and offices around the globe, the pace of work slows to a gentle cadence. This was the atmosphere of the holiday watch. The teams on duty were the guardians of the quiet, their vigil a peaceful one. The data streams flowed as they always did, a massive digital river moving through the world. The analysts observed this river, noting its familiar currents, its predictable tides. Their screens showed the normal weather of the internet, the gentle rise of traffic as continents woke, the slow decline as they slept. Everything was as it should be. The anomaly did not announce itself. It was found in the digital equivalent of a quiet, forgotten archive room. An analyst, observing the endless scroll of automated logs, noticed an entry that seemed out of place. It was a single digital thread, one among trillions. In a tapestry of near infinite complexity, this one thread seemed to be the wrong color, the wrong texture. On its own, it meant very little. It could have been a momentary glitch, a simple error in a piece of code, a mistyped command from a remote administrator. These small deviations happened all the time. They were the harmless static of a complex system. But the watchman's job was not to dismiss, it was to understand. The entry was a flag, a quiet bell that had rung in the digital observatory, and the analyst's purpose was to find out why it rang. With patient, methodical curiosity, the analyst began to pull on this single digital thread. The thread led from one system to another. It showed a presence, a set of credentials, moving in a way that was not typical. It moved from a simple, public-facing server, one that might host a blog or a public forum, to a more sensitive internal system. This was the first point of serious interest. The digital gardens were designed to keep these pathways separate, with high walls and locked gates between them. The thread then led deeper, connecting to another internal system, and then another. The analyst, now joined by a few others from the holiday team, began to map the path this thread had taken. It was not a random or chaotic path. It was deliberate. It was precise. It was almost impossibly quiet. As they traced this path, they realized this was not an error. It was the trail of an unknown presence inside the network. This was not a loud, disruptive event. There were no broken doors, no alarms, no digital footprints left in the mud. The operators, whoever they were, had not forced their way in. They had moved with a stillness, a purpose. They were not like thieves smashing a window. They were more like moles in a garden, burrowing quietly beneath the surface, unseen. They moved from one point to another, creating their own small hidden tunnels, connecting parts of the garden that were never meant to be connected. They were utterly silent, leaving almost no trace on the surface. This realization was met not with panic, but with a deep professional puzzlement. The security teams at Google saw automated probes and common events every single day. They were accustomed to the noise of the internet, the constant, predictable waves crashing against the network's outer walls. This was different. This was like a change in the current, deep beneath the surface. It was a silent, powerful movement that signaled a deeper force at play. The tools being used were not common, not the off-the-shelf software available on any public forum. They appeared to be custom-made, crafted for a single purpose. The methods were layered, one subtle technique built upon another. The operators had moved with a fluency, an understanding of Google's internal architecture that was deeply sophisticated. They navigated the complex internal pathways with an ease that was unexpected. They seemed to know the internal names of the servers. They knew the protocols. They were not guessing or fumbling in the dark. They were moving with a map. The small holiday team, now fully alert, understood they were looking at an event more advanced, more intricate than anything they had ever seen before within these walls. The response was as methodical as the operators themselves. The skeleton crew expanded. In quiet homes, pages and phones began to light up. Engineers, architects, and analysts were called back, not to a raging fire, but to a complex, delicate puzzle that needed to be solved. They gathered in digital war rooms, which were simply quiet, focused, encrypted conference calls, their voices calm and measured. Their first priority was containment, but to contain the presence, they first had to understand its full scope. Where had the tunnels been dug? How many were there? They began to map this hidden, subterranean network. For a time, they simply watched. This was a live dissection. They observed the operators' movements, cataloging their tools, trying to deduce their goals. They watched the moles move, tracking their habits, before they began to seal the tunnels, one by one. The process was delicate. It was a digital cleansing of the network, a meticulous restoration of the garden. This was not a matter of simply blocking a single address. That would be like locking the front door after the presence was already inside and knew the floor plan. This required a systemic, holistic review. The teams had to assume the operators were still present, still watching, so the response itself had to be quiet. Changes were made under the cover of routine maintenance. New security patches were deployed. The digital infrastructure was subtly rekeyed. The locks changed while the operators were still inside, until their own custom tools and hidden pathways simply stopped working. It was a digital eviction, performed with the subtlety of a magician, a quiet restoration of order. By early January of 2010, the incident was over. The systems were clean. The garden was, once again, quiet. But the puzzle remained. The watchmen and the gardeners had successfully removed the anomaly, but the questions had only just begun. This was not a simple event. The level of resources, the patience, the bespoke tools, all pointed to something new. This was not common static. This was a signal, and the team now had to find out who was sending it and what it meant. The expanding echo. In the first weeks of the new year, Google shared its findings. It was like dropping a single smooth stone onto the surface of a vast, frozen lake. A small, clear sound in the winter, quiet, a fracturing of the perfect, silent surface. And then, across the ice, other similar sounds began to echo in return. On January 12, 2010, Google published a blog post. This was, in itself, an unusual event. Companies of this scale, especially regarding matters of internal security, typically operated with quiet discretion. The post was titled, "A New Approach to China," and its primary message was one of a profound policy shift. But woven into this announcement was the first official public acknowledgement of the anomaly. The language was precise, measured, and carefully chosen. It spoke of a highly sophisticated and targeted event originating from China, which had resulted in the access of information. The statement was the pebble. It confirmed the internal findings. The tools were new, the methods advanced, and the goal appeared to be observation. More than that, the post noted that Google had discovered that a number of other companies were similarly affected. This was the first ripple. The silence of the holiday season, the quiet internal investigation, was now a public matter. The digital world, which so often moves at the speed of light, paused and held its breath. The implications of that single sentence began to settle. This was not just a Google event. The first echo did not take long. It came just hours after Google's post. A new statement appeared, this time from Adobe Systems. Adobe was and is another foundational pillar of the digital world. If Google's purpose was to organize information, Adobe's was to provide the tools to create it. The makers of Photoshop, the program that built the visual language of the web, the creators of Acrobat and the portable document format, or PDF, the standard for digital documents worldwide, the developers of Flash, the engine that powered a generation of interactive websites. Their statement was brief, almost terse, but its significance was immense. They too admitted they had experienced a security incident. They too were investigating. This confirmation changed the very nature of the story. The anomaly was not isolated. The stone that had landed on Google's side of the lake had a twin that had landed on Adobe's. And if there were two, how many more were there? The true nature of the event then began to reveal itself, not in a sudden crash, but in a growing chorus. The two public announcements acted as a signal, a kind of shared permission to speak. It was as if two people in a silent, crowded auditorium had begun to whisper, and suddenly, all around the room, others realized they were not alone. The whispers grew, quietly, through secure back channels, and then in more public disclosures, other names began to surface, one by one. Yahoo, another giant of the early internet, a pioneer in search, in email, in digital media. Rackspace, a company that provided the very bones of the internet, the physical infrastructure and web hosting services that countless other businesses were built upon. Microsoft, the architect of the world's most common desktop operating system, the digital environment where most of the world conducted its work. Juniper Networks, a builder of the core pathways, the digital plumbing, the routers and switches that connect the entire internet. The list continued to grow, and as it did, the profile of the event shifted again. It was not just a technology event. Dow Chemical, a cornerstone of global industry, a 100-year-old company that dealt in the physical, material world, confirmed it had also seen the signs. This was a critical revelation. The operators were not just interested in source code and digital communication. They were interested in industrial processes, in complex manufacturing, in the formulas and trade secrets that create the physical materials of our modern world. The scale was breathtaking. Google's initial detection had identified over 20 distinct companies. Some external security reports, as researchers and firms began to pool their data, suggested a number far higher. It was whispered that perhaps as many as 200 companies had been quietly, methodically observed. This was no longer a story about a single company or even a single industry. It was the discovery of a vast, coordinated campaign. The companies involved, many of them fierce competitors in the open market, now found themselves in a new, shared, and unexpected space. They began a quiet, collaborative effort. They were, in essence, comparing notes. It was like astronomers on different continents who had all been observing what they thought was a singular, dim star, suddenly communicating with one another. They shared their coordinates, they shared their observations, they shared their data. And as they did, they began to map a newly discovered constellation. The individual points of light, the separate, isolated incidents, began to connect. They formed a pattern, a singular shape in the digital sky that no single observer had been able to see on their own. This was not a series of independent events. This was one single coordinated operation of a scope and sophistication that the commercial world had never seen. The tone of this collaboration was not one of panic. It was one of a growing, sober sense of shared significance. This was a new phenomenon. The digital world had known simple intrusions. It had known loud, disruptive, smash and grab operations and random acts of digital vandalism. This was none of those. This was patient. It was well-funded. It was persistent. And it was profoundly sophisticated. Everyone involved in this new chorus of shared discovery seemed to understand with a quiet gravity that the very nature of their digital environment had changed. The garden walls, they now knew, were not just being tested by simple opportunists. They were being observed, mapped, and silently bypassed by an entity with the patience and resources of a nation-state. The investigation, therefore, became a global, unified effort. The affected companies, independent security firms, and now law enforcement agencies all began to pool their knowledge. They were all looking for the source, the motive, and the name of this new constellation. The most pressing question was simple. What was this, and who was the architect? The answer, it was hoped, lay buried in the digital artifacts, in the unique, custom-made tools that had been left behind. The Aurora signature. As security researchers and digital forensic teams began to sift through the digital artifacts left by the event, they found something unexpected. It was a small human fingerprint, a simple trace of the hand that had crafted the code. It was not a message, not a clue left on purpose, but an accidental artifact, a small, mundane detail. Buried deep in a file path, a simple line of text was a single word: Aurora. The echo from the public announcements had faded, and in its place, a quiet, intense period of study had begun. The program itself, the custom-made code that had been found on the systems of Google, Adobe, and so many others, was now the central object of focus. Copies of this digital specimen were being shared securely between the affected companies and with independent security laboratories around the world. One of these was McAfee, a company whose entire purpose was the study and classification of digital code. This program was not treated as a weapon, but as a subject of profound scientific curiosity. It was, in essence, a new discovery. The researchers in these labs were like digital botanists who had been handed a new species of plant, one with no known origin, no entry in any textbook. Their first task was to place this specimen in a safe, controlled environment. They used what is known as a sandbox, which is a digital greenhouse, a sealed virtual computer, completely isolated from the outside world. Inside this safe container, they would activate the program. This was the first stage of observation. They would let the plant grow, just to see what it did. They watched with meticulous patience. Did it attempt to sprout roots into the core of the system? Did it try to send out pollen, to connect to an outside address on the internet? What kind of nutrients did it seek? Did it look for specific files? Did it record keystrokes? Did it attempt to copy itself? This passive observation was the first layer of understanding, a way to map the program's behavior in a living environment. What they saw confirmed the initial findings from Google. The program was quiet. It was stealthy. It did not make loud, disruptive changes. Its first action was to open a subtle, encrypted channel of communication, a tunnel, back to a command and control server. It was designed to be a conduit, a pathway for its operators to send further instructions. It was, in effect, a digital backdoor, but one that was seamlessly blended with the normal, everyday traffic of the network. It was a tool of patience, a tool for observation. But to truly understand it, observation was not enough. The botanist must also dissect the plant. This next phase is known as reverse engineering. It is the methodical, meticulous process of taking the program apart, piece by piece, to understand how it was built. It is the digital equivalent of dismantling a complex alien pocket watch to see how its gears and springs interlock, to deduce its function from its form. The researchers used a tool called a disassembler. A program, in its final form, is compiled into machine code, a dense, unreadable stream of ones and zeros. A disassembler acts as a kind of digital Rosetta Stone. It translates that dense machine code back into a lower level but human-readable set of instructions called assembly language. This language is not simple, but to a trained researcher, it reveals the program's logic. It is like looking at the architect's original, highly technical blueprints. This is a slow, contemplative process. A researcher sits, scrolling through thousands upon thousands of lines of these cryptic instructions. They are like a digital archaeologist, patiently brushing the dust from an intricate, ancient mechanism. They are looking for patterns, for familiar structures. They trace the flow of logic. If this file exists, go here. If this connection is made, do this. They are, in essence, redrawing the blueprint of the program's mind. It was during this slow, methodical dissection that one of the researchers at McAfee noticed a peculiar string of text. It was a file path. A file path is a simple, human-readable address that shows where a file is stored on a computer. It is like a set of nesting dolls, a series of folders, one inside the other. For example, my documents, then projects, then version 1. This particular file path was not a command. It was not part of the program's active logic. It was a piece of debug information, a label, an artifact left over from the original computer, the computer of the operator who had built the program. The path was a fossil, an imprint of the creator's own digital workspace. It showed the folder name that the operator had used to store their project. and that name was Aurora. This was the aha moment. It was not a loud, dramatic discovery. It was a small, quiet moment of clarity. This simple, mundane word, a word that the operator had likely chosen for their own internal project, was now the key. It was a human name. It was not a string of numbers, not a technical designation. It was Aurora. The researchers at McAfee were the first to publish their detailed analysis of the program, and they used this name as its identifier. The name stuck, and it quickly spread through the entire security community. It was evocative, poetic even. It suggested the Aurora Borealis, the northern lights, a silent, beautiful, and mysterious presence in the sky, visible but untouchable. It also suggested the dawn, the beginning of a new era, and in a very real sense, this was the dawn of a new, more sophisticated, more patient kind of digital operation, one that would change the landscape of security. The event, this collection of widespread, sophisticated anomalies, now had a signature. It was no longer an abstract collection of incidents. It was, from that moment on, Operation Aurora. This single human word became the index tab, the official title for the puzzle. It was the common language that every researcher, every affected company, and every government agency could now use to refer to this shared event. It was a simple, tangible detail, a solid piece of ground in a shifting, abstract landscape, and it was a profound reminder that on the other side of this complex, seemingly alien code, there was another person or a team of people sitting at their own computers who had given their work a name. The puzzle now had a title, but a name is just the beginning. It identifies the object, but it does not explain how it was used. The next step was to understand the mechanics of the event, to follow the full, intricate chain of actions that allowed the Aurora program to be placed inside the garden in the first place. The digital invitation. The entry point was not a broken wall or a forced lock. It was not a flaw in the code of the fortress itself, but something far more subtle. It was a simple, digital invitation, arriving in the course of a normal business day. And it was crafted with such profound care that it looked identical to any other piece of daily correspondence. The operators had understood a fundamental truth. The most complex, most secure digital city in the world is still inhabited by people, and people operate on a currency of trust. This was not a common, imprecise attempt at deception. The internet was, and is, flooded with such noise. Mass-marketed emails claiming an inheritance or a prize or an urgent, unbelievable problem. These are like digital leaflets scattered to the wind, hoping one might land on an unsuspecting doorstep. They are loud and obvious and easy for both automated filters and trained employees to identify and discard. This invitation was the opposite. It was not a net. It was a spear. It was a single, weighted, and perfectly aimed message, intended for a single, specific individual. The process began long before any message was sent. It began with a period of silent, patient observation. The operators, working from the outside, became digital biographers, or perhaps cultural anthropologists. They first had to select their target, the person who would receive the invitation. This would not be a random choice. They would be looking for a person whose job was, by its nature, collaborative. A developer, a project manager, an engineer, someone whose daily work involved a constant flow of communication with colleagues. Once a name was chosen, the research began. This too was a quiet and subtle art, using only information that was publicly available. The operators would study the digital footprint of this individual. They might find them on professional networking sites, noting their job title, their responsibilities, and, crucially, their list of colleagues. They might find a paper the person had published or a video of a talk they had given at an industry conference. In these public materials, the person might thank their team, naming the very people they worked with every day. From these scattered public breadcrumbs, the operators began to build a map. It was not a map of the network, but a map of social trust. They learned the names of managers, of direct reports, of teammates on a shared project. They learned the internal language, the project code names, the acronyms, and the specific cadence of communication used within that small, insular team. They were learning the culture. Only after this meticulous research was the invitation itself crafted. This was not a simple forgery of an email address. It was a forgery of a relationship. It was as if a spy, intending to pass a note, had first spent months studying the handwriting of a trusted friend. They learned their specific turns of phrase, the way they formed their letters, the private jokes they might share. The spy would then recreate the stationery, the weight of the paper, the very brand of ink, until the forgery was not just a copy, but a perfect, living echo of the real thing. The crafted message would have looked mundane, almost boring. It would have appeared to come from a real colleague, a name the recipient knew and trusted. The from field, while digitally spoofed to appear legitimate, would have matched a name in the company directory. The subject line would not be alarming. It would be simple, plausible. Draft of project plan, perhaps, or thoughts on our last meeting, or here is that link we discussed. The body of the message would be the masterpiece. It would be brief, casual, and professional. It would use the correct internal language. Hi, it might read. Here are the notes from the Q4 planning call. I uploaded the slides to the shared drive. Take a look and let me know your thoughts before the end of the day. It would sound perfectly normal. Just one more small task in a day filled with them. And then there was the link. It was not presented as a danger, but as a convenience. Click here to view the file. It was a simple, blue, underlined piece of text. It was the call to action, but it was disguised as a simple, collaborative gesture. The recipient, the engineer or manager, would be sitting at their desk, working through a long list of tasks. Dozens of similar, legitimate messages would be in their inbox. Their job was to review plans, to check slides, to collaborate with their team. When this message arrived, there was no reason to be suspicious. It did not trigger any of the established alarms. It was not from a stranger. It was not offering a prize. It was not threatening. It was simply a piece of work. And so, the recipient would move their mouse. This was not a moment of failure, not an error or a lapse in judgment. It was the logical, intended, and almost inevitable outcome of a perfect illusion. To click the link was not a moment of weakness. It was a moment of productivity, a simple, reflexive action to move a task forward. The click was a quiet, mundane, physical act. It was a gesture of trust, the same gesture made 100 times that very day. The invitation was accepted, and in that ordinary, silent moment, The digital door to the city, a door protected by layers of the world's most advanced code, was gently and unknowingly pushed open by a human hand. The unseen door. The recipient clicked the link and the browser opened. A blank, white page began to load. In a normal world, in almost every other instance, the story would have ended right there. The computer's defenses were all in place. The digital locks were new, and they were fully engaged. But this link did not open a known door. The employee at Google or Adobe or any of the other organizations was not careless. They were, in fact, following good practices. Their computer was what the technical world calls fully patched. This is a concept of digital hygiene, a routine of care and maintenance. Software is not like a block of carved stone, finished and perfect for all time. It is more like a vast, complex, aging house, a structure with thousands of windows, doors, pipes, and electrical circuits. Over time, as the house is lived in, small flaws are discovered. A window latch is found to be loose. A lock on a back door is discovered to be sticky. A draft is found coming from a crack in the foundation. When the architect of that house, in this case, Microsoft, the creator of the Internet Explorer browser, finds one of these flaws, they craft a repair. They design a new, stronger latch. They engineer a better pin for the lock. They create a special sealant for the foundation. This repair is called a patch. The company then sends this patch out to all the homeowners, who, by accepting the automatic update, have the repairman instantly install the fix. A fully patched computer is a house whose owner has diligently accepted every single one of these repairs. Every known drafty window has been sealed. Every known sticky lock has been fixed. The house is, by all public knowledge, secure. The employee who clicked the link had just such a house. Their browser was up to date. So, when they clicked the link, they were, in essence, walking to their front door to look at a note someone had left. They were safe within their own home. And yet, the moment they clicked, the story continued. The operator's invitation worked. The browser, secure against all known entry methods, was bypassed. This was the true, sophisticated heart of the entire operation. The operators were not using a known, patched flaw. They were using a key for a lock that the architect, Microsoft, did not even know existed. This is what is known as a 0 day. The name is not a technical one, but a concept of time. It refers to the number of days that the software creator has been aware of the flaw. For the architect of the house, this was day 0. They had no knowledge of this flaw's existence. They had not had a single day, not a single hour, to design a patch, to craft a repair, to warn the homeowners. The flaw was a complete, protected secret, known only to the operators who had discovered it. To understand the significance, imagine a company that builds the most advanced bank vault in the world. They use new alloys, complex tumblers, and time-delayed mechanisms. They test it against every known method of entry, and it is perfect. They ship these vaults, and they are installed in banks all over the world. But a small, quiet group somewhere has managed to acquire a copy of the original blueprints. This group does not attack the vault. They study it. For months, perhaps for years, they pore over the intricate drawings, the complex gear ratios, the schematics of the locking mechanism. And in that patient, meticulous study, they find a single, tiny, overlooked detail, a flaw in the design itself, a specific sequence of 5 turns, a precise amount of pressure on the dial, and a gentle pull at a specific second, a sequence the designers had never intended, had never even considered. It is not a weakness, but a hidden, unintended property of the design's complexity. From this knowledge, they can craft a key. It is not a battering ram, not a drill, not an explosive. It is a simple, elegant, perfect key. One day, a person walks into a bank with this key. They slide it into the brand new billion-dollar vault. The lock makes no sound of protest. The key turns smoothly, and the massive, reinforced door simply glides open. The bank manager is baffled. The vault company is stunned. They did not even know that key shape was possible. This is what the Aurora operators possessed: a zero-day key for Internet Explorer. It was a piece of information, a secret that was almost priceless. Such keys are not found by accident. They are the result of either immense, dedicated internal research, the work of digital watchmakers patiently taking the program apart, line by line, or they are purchased. In the hidden corners of the digital world, there exists a quiet, exclusive marketplace for such things. It is a library of secrets, where a single working zero-day key can be sold for hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars. When the employee clicked the link, their browser opened the operator's webpage. This webpage was not a simple document. It contained this key. The moment the page began to load, it spoke to the browser using this secret, unknown flaw. It used the flaw to whisper a single, simple command, a command that should have been impossible. The command was, download the program that is waiting at this other address, and once you have it, run it. The browser, the very guardian that was meant to protect the computer, was momentarily and invisibly turned into the usher. It had been given an order it could not disobey, because it had been designed without a defense for it. The action was a whisper, lasting less than a second. The unseen door had been opened, not with force, but with a perfect secret key. And in that silent moment, a new piece of code, the Aurora program itself, was invited to step inside. The silent passenger. Once the unseen door was opened, a new program was downloaded onto the system. It was a silent passenger, a piece of code so new, so fresh, that it cast no shadow and made no sound. The command from the browser was a whisper, but it was absolute. In the space of a heartbeat, a stream of data flowed from a distant server across the internet and into the employee's computer. It was not a file in the way one thinks of a document or a picture. It was a set of instructions, assembling itself not on the hard drive, but in the computer's active memory, its short-term consciousness. This was the Aurora program itself. The payload, the purpose of the entire intricate chain of events. It had arrived. In any modern computer, this arrival should have triggered an immediate alarm. Every system has its own digital guardians, its own security patrols. We know them as antivirus software. These programs are in a state of constant, quiet vigilance. Their function is simple but critical. They are like a security guard standing at the main entrance of a very busy building. This guard has a very large book, a book filled with thousands, even millions, of wanted posters. These posters are called signatures, and they are the unique digital fingerprints of every known undesirable program. When any new piece of code tries to enter the system, the guard stops it. The guard checks its face, its digital structure, against every poster in the book. If there is a match, the The guard denies entry, and the program is placed in quarantine, a digital holding cell. This is how the system stays clean, by recognizing the faces of known troublemakers from the past. But the Aurora program, it had no poster. It was not in the book. It was not, in fact, in any book. It was a brand new, freshly made program. The code had been written, compiled, and used for the very first time in this very operation. When this silent passenger arrived at the gate, the security guard, the antivirus, dutifully stopped it. It checked the program's face against its millions of posters. There was no match. The program was not on the list. It was a stranger, an unknown. It did not look threatening. It was not carrying any of the obvious, known tools of disruption. And so, with no signature to match, and no malicious behavior to flag, the guard simply stepped aside. The silent passenger was allowed to pass, unhindered. It was a fundamental limitation of a system built to look for the past, not for the present. Once inside, the program did not make a sound. It did not announce its presence. It was not a digital bomb designed to explode and cause immediate, visible chaos. It was not a sledgehammer designed to break down internal doors. It was something far more subtle. It was a listening device. It was a digital skeleton key. It was a tool of pure observation, designed with one purpose: to reside on the system. It found a quiet, unassuming corner of the operating system to settle into. It used strong encryption to cloak its own code, to make its own internal components unreadable to any passing internal patrols. It was built for persistence, and it was built for stealth. Now that the passenger was inside the house, it needed a way to speak to the operators who had sent it. It needed a way to receive instructions and perhaps to send information back. But this was the second and greater challenge. The computer's connection to the outside world, the network, was also being watched. The watchmen at Google, the security teams, were observing the flow of data. If this new program suddenly opened a strange, loud, and obvious connection to an unknown server in a foreign country, it would be like a person in a quiet library suddenly shouting in a different language. It would be instantly noticed. The Aurora program, therefore, was designed with a brilliant second layer of stealth. It did not shout, it whispered. And it whispered in a way that sounded exactly like all the other normal conversations happening in the room. A computer, in the course of its normal operation, is a very noisy place. It is in constant, legitimate communication with the outside world. It is checking for email. It is synchronizing the clock. It is asking for website addresses. It is receiving software updates. This is the normal, ambient hum of the digital room. The Aurora program was built to listen to this hum, to learn its pitch, its cadence, its accent. Then it created its own connection, its own tunnel back to its operators. But it disguised this conversation. It encrypted its own data and then wrapped that encrypted data inside a package that looked identical to all the other normal web traffic. It was a secret, encoded conversation, happening in plain sight, perfectly blended with the noise of the crowded room. Even the most astute watchman, observing the flow of traffic, would see nothing out of the ordinary. They would only see one more, quiet, normal conversation, indistinguishable from the millions of others. All of this happened in the span of a few seconds. The employee clicked the link. The unseen door was opened by the 0-day key. The silent passenger the Aurora program was downloaded. It passed, unseen by the antivirus guard. It settled into a quiet corner of the system, and it opened its invisible, encrypted tunnel, blending its secret conversation with the noise of the network. The employee on their screen saw only a blank page that failed to load. They likely felt a moment of mild annoyance, perhaps hit the back button, and then archived the email, their mind already moving on to the next task in their busy day. But the passenger was now inside. The connection was stable. The operators, miles away, had their first persistent foothold. The tool was in place, a silent, patient observer, waiting for its first set of instructions. The observers. When the engineers traced the paths of these silent visitors, the question became, what were they looking for? The presence was established. The silent, invisible tunnels had been mapped by the security teams. But to what destination did these pathways lead? The first answer, discovered in the quiet, meticulous review of the system logs, was not money, nor disruption, nor destruction. The operators had not behaved as vandals. They had moved with the precision of surgeons, the quiet of observers. Their goal was pure information. Their foothold was secure. The silent passenger was in place, and the invisible tunnel was open and stable. The first movements of the operators, now that they had this persistent access, were not broad. They moved, again with that characteristic quiet, toward the vast digital archives of Google's communication systems. Specifically, they showed a profound and focused interest in the Gmail service, the system that housed the digital correspondence of millions. But this was not a wide, indiscriminate search. The operators were not casting a vast net, hoping to trawl for random secrets. They were, once again, using a spear. The logs showed that their activities, their queries, their pathways were all directed at a very small, very specific list of accounts. These accounts did not belong to high-profile executives, or to the engineers who held the system's keys, or to financial officers. They belonged to individuals who were, in their own way, observers and critics themselves. The accounts, the logs showed, were registered to prominent Chinese human rights activists. This was the first clear signal of motive. This was not corporate espionage in the traditional sense, not one company seeking a competitor's trade secrets. This was a mission of human intelligence. The operators were seeking insight into the plans, the private conversations, and the professional networks of these individuals. These were people whose life's work involved documenting, organizing, and publicizing human rights issues within mainland China. Their email accounts were their central coordination point, their digital meeting room, their private archive, and their most sensitive list of contacts. To gain access to these accounts would be like sitting invisibly in the corner of their most private, confidential meetings. It would be like reading their personal correspondence, their day-to-day diaries, and their strategic plans. It would offer a complete and detailed map of their social and professional landscape, revealing who they spoke to, both inside and outside the country, what they were planning, and how they organized their activities. The operators were seeking this map. They were observers, looking at other observers. But as the Google security team continued to analyze this very specific target list, they cross-referenced it with their own internal legal records. And in doing so, they found a pattern, a correlation. that was deeply and profoundly puzzling. It was a detail that did not seem to fit, a piece of the puzzle that belonged to a different box. This discovery added a layer of profound mystery to the entire event. Every single one of the accounts that the operators had shown interest in, every single one, was already the subject of a separate, formal court order from the United States government. This meant that United States law enforcement, through the official, established legal process, had already requested access to these exact same accounts. These were accounts that Google was already under a legal obligation, either monitoring or providing data for, as part of official domestic investigations. This discovery was baffling to the researchers. It did not seem logical. It created far more questions than it answered. Why would an operation of this sophistication, an operation that had deployed multiple priceless secret zero-day keys, why would this immense state-level effort be directed at information that was, in some sense, already being collected by another government agency? Several theories began to form in the quiet, late-night conversations of the investigation. Perhaps this was not an attempt to get the information itself, but a form of checking the checkers. Were the operators using their secret access to see what the United States government was able to see? Were they trying to understand the scope, the methods, and the speed of American digital surveillance? Was it a mission to find out what the investigators knew? Or perhaps it was a kind of test, a way to see how much and how quickly Google would comply with a legal request, and what the digital fingerprints of that compliance looked like from the inside. Or was it possible that this was all just a complex, bureaucratic coincidence? Was it simply a case of two different, powerful entities with similar and overlapping interests arriving at the same digital doorstep at the very same time, but using two completely different doors? One, the public, legal front door, and the other, a secret, invisible side entrance. The puzzle was never definitively solved. It remains, to this day, one of the most curious and contemplative footnotes of the entire Aurora event. It was an intellectual riddle, a koan of the new digital age. But the most immediate question was one of security. The operators were inside, and they were moving toward these accounts. The investigation was now a live, silent race. The Google team, now fully aware of their presence and their specific destination, moved to intercept them. This was not a loud confrontation. It was a silent, digital chess game, played on the internal servers of the network. The Google team was successful because the anomaly had been detected in its early stages. The internal response was swift, precise, and effective. The operators were sealed off from their ultimate goal. They had reached the outside of the digital archive room, but they were never able to open the file drawers themselves. The logs were clear on this point. The operators were only able to see metadata. This is a crucial distinction. Metadata is the envelope, not the letter. The operators were able to see the to and from addresses on the outside of the envelope. They could see that a message had been sent and when it was sent. They could read the subject line, the small piece of text visible to all, but the letter inside, the content of the message, the private words, the secret plans, that remained sealed. The body of the emails was never accessed. The core of the activists' private communications remained unseen. The first objective, This quiet mission of human observation had been quietly and effectively neutralized by Google's response. But as the engineers continued to trace the full, branching paths of the Aurora presence, they discovered the operators were not just interested in people. They were interested in the machine itself. They had a second, and perhaps far more significant, objective: the digital blueprints. The second objective was something different. It was a search, running in parallel to the first, not for people, but for the very heart of Google itself. The operators were moving toward the digital blueprints for the company's own software. Their goal was to acquire the source code, the set of secret, human-readable instructions that gave birth to the entire digital city. This was not a secondary mission. It was a quiet, simultaneous, and perhaps far more significant undertaking. To understand the gravity of this, one must first understand what source code truly is. It is a concept that is both simple and profoundly complex. In the simplest terms, it is the secret recipe. When we visit a website or use a piece of software, we are interacting with the finished product. We are, in effect, eating a magnificent, complex cake. We can taste the flavors, we can admire its structure, we can enjoy the experience it provides. But we do not know how it was made. We do not know the precise ratio of ingredients, the temperature of the oven, the exact sequence of steps taken by the master baker. The source code is that recipe. It is the original, private, and meticulously guarded set of instructions, written not in the ones and zeros of a machine, but in a human-readable language, a language like C++ or Java or Python. It is the text that the engineers themselves write, the poem from which all translations are made. This human-readable code is the intellectual property, the idea itself. To continue the analogy of the digital city, the live Google website is the city itself. We can walk its streets, visit its buildings, use its services. The source code, on the other hand, is the architect's complete set of master blueprints. It is not just the plans for one building, but for all of them. It is the blueprints for the power grid, the plans for the water system, the engineering diagrams for the transit network, and even the chemical formula for the unique kind of concrete used in every foundation. This collection of digital blueprints is, without question, the most valuable, most sensitive, and most carefully protected asset that a software company possesses. It is the culmination of all their research, all their innovation, all their failures, and all their successes. It represents millions of hours of human thought, billions of dollars in research and development. It is the company's mind written down. The operators wanted this mind, and they wanted it for two distinct, powerful reasons. The first reason was one of replication. If you possess the master blueprints for the world's most advanced and efficient search engine, you can build one yourself. You can skip the 10 or 15 or 20 years of painstaking research. You can bypass the billions of dollars spent on experimentation, the thousands of brilliant engineers who work to solve a million tiny complex problems. You can avoid all the dead ends, all the failed pathways, all the hypotheses that did not work. You are given a map that starts you at the finish line. A competing company or a nation could use these blueprints to build their own parallel version of Google's services. They could create a competing search engine, a competing email system, a competing advertising network, They could replicate the cake because they now possessed the recipe. This was an act of profound economic and industrial espionage, a way to transfer in a single, silent digital transfer a generation's worth of intellectual property. The second reason was more subtle and in many ways more sophisticated. It was not about building a competing product. It was about dismantling the existing one, to learn its secrets, to find its hidden flaws. If you are a group who wishes to find new, unseen doors in a system, new zero-day keys, you can do it from the outside. You can, like a patient locksmith, spend years tapping on the wall of a bank vault, listening for a hollow sound. You can probe and test, year after year, hoping to find a flaw. This is difficult, slow, and often fruitless. But if you have the original blueprints for that vault, you do not have to guess. You can sit down in a quiet room and study the design. You can analyze every tumbler, every gear, every locking mechanism. You can trace the logic, and you can find the small, unintended interactions, the flaws in the design that the original architects themselves missed. Possessing the source code is like possessing the bank vault's blueprints. It is the ultimate shortcut to finding new, perfect, zero-day keys. The Aurora operators had already used at least one such key to gain entry. This second objective strongly suggested they were not just using keys. They were hunting for the ability to create them. They were looking for the blueprints to Adobe's products, to Microsoft's products, to Google's products, so they could go back to their own workshops and begin the patient work of finding new flaws, creating a whole new generation of secret keys for their future operations. It was a self-perpetuating cycle, an act of acquiring the tools to build more tools. This then was the second silent hunt, the search for the digital blueprints. These files, this immensely valuable source code, could not be stored on just any server. It could not be passed around in emails or kept on an engineer's personal computer. For a company the size of Google, with thousands of engineers all working on the same city plan at the same time, a special, secure system was required. This system is known as a Software Configuration Management System, or SCM. This is the master library. It is the digital, fireproof, climate-controlled vault where the one, true, original copy of every blueprint is kept. When an engineer, one of the thousands of architects, needs to work on a part of the city, perhaps to add a new feature or to fix a known flaw, they do not take the master copy. Instead, they go to the master library. They check out a perfect copy of the blueprint they need. They take this copy back to their own separate digital workshop. They make their changes. They test their new design. And when they are finished, they bring their modified copy back to the master librarian, the SCM. The librarian does not simply replace the old version. It meticulously compares the old blueprint with the new one. It notes every single change, every line that was added, every dimension that was altered. It records who made the change, and when they made it, and why they made it. This new, modified blueprint is then stored, and the old version is carefully archived right alongside it. The SCM is, therefore, more than just a vault. It is a perfect, living history of the digital city. It is a complete second-by-second log of every single decision, every modification, every idea that went into building the entire structure. It is the complete, collected works of the company's brightest minds. There are many philosophies for how to build such a library. Some are known as concurrent version systems, or CVS. Others are called Microsoft Visual Source Safe, or IBM Rational. At Google, at this specific moment in time, their master library, their vault, was a system known as Perforce. The Aurora operators, moving silently through the internal network, were now heading for this library. They knew its name, and they knew where it was kept. The Perforce library. The operators, having established their presence, now moved toward their second goal, the Perforce library. This system, this digital vault where the source code was kept, was the target. And as the internal logs revealed their movements, a clear and chilling picture emerged. The operators were not fumbling. They were not exploring. They moved with an unnerving confidence, a silent precision, as if they had walked these digital hallways 100 times before. They seemed to know the library's layout intimately, perhaps even better than the librarians. This was not an accident. This level of fluency implied a deep, pre-existing intelligence. The operators had not just shown up at the campus gates. They had, in some prior, unobserved phase, acquired a floor plan. They knew the internal server names, the pathways, the protocols. This was the final, quiet step in a much longer, patient journey. The system they were walking toward, Perforce, was a well-known and widely respected software configuration management system. In an environment like Google, a place of immense scale with thousands of engineers all needing to work on the same set of blueprints simultaneously, Perforce was a logical choice. It was renowned for its speed, its ability to handle an almost unimaginable number of files, and its capacity to manage a constant, high-speed flow of changes. It was a system built for performance, designed to be the frictionless, central hub for a culture of rapid innovation. But to achieve this speed and scale, its designers had made a specific choice. It was a choice that was common at the time. A choice built on a different model of security. The system was, by its nature, not a fortress. It was, as security researchers would later note, insecure by default. This was not a flaw in the way one thinks of a broken lock or a cracked wall. It was a design philosophy. Perforce was a system built to run inside a trusted network. It operated on the assumption that if you were already inside the main, external gates of the campus, you were likely a trusted employee. Its philosophy was one of access, not obstruction. It was built to make the work of thousands of trusted engineers easier and faster. It was, in our analogy, a library on a quiet, private university campus. It was built with an open-door philosophy. Its architects had prioritized light, air, and ease of access for its members, all while assuming the high campus walls themselves were the real security. As McAfee and other researchers began to analyze the Perforce system in the wake of the Aurora event, they found a series of these philosophical open doors. First was the process of becoming a member. In this library, there was no stern-faced administrator guarding the entrance, no rigorous background check to receive a card. Instead, there was a simple, open logbook on a front desk. Any person who had already been admitted to the main campus, any person with a basic internal network connection, could, in theory, walk up to this logbook, create their own new user account, and in effect, issue themselves a library card. There was no need for a high-level administrator to approve the request. The system was designed to trust, to be self-service. Second was the nature of communication. The communications within this library were not secret. The system, in its default state, operated in clear text. This meant that any conversation between a visitor and a librarian, any request for a specific blueprint, was spoken in a normal, clear voice. Any other person standing inside the library could, if they were quiet and listening, overhear these conversations. The passwords themselves, the secret phrases that visitors used to identify themselves to the librarians, were also spoken in this clear, audible voice. They were not passed as a coded, secret note. Third was the library's catalogue. It was easy to gather information about the library's collection without any special privileges. A visitor with a basic, self-issued card could browse the entire card catalogue, learning the names and locations of every blueprint in the collection, even those in restricted sections. They could see what was popular, what was being checked out, and by whom. It was a system designed for transparency. Fourth was the storage of the blueprints themselves. The books in this library were not written in a complex, unreadable cipher. The files, the precious source code, were also stored in clear text. This meant that the blueprints were written in their original, human-readable language. If you could get to the correct shelf and you possessed a library card, you could simply pull the book from the shelf, open it, and read it. There was no need for a second secret decoder ring. The information was simply there. And finally, the very structure of the building was designed for openness. Researchers noted that the system was prone to what is called a directory traversal. This meant that a clever visitor, by making a specific, unusual request of the librarian, could potentially be shown a pathway off the main marked visitors path. It was a way to traverse into a staff-only corridor, a way to access shelves and sections of the library that were not meant for public viewing. Now, this was the default design of the Perforce library. It is unknown and unknowable exactly how this system was configured inside Google. The engineers at Google were among the best in the world. They would have been aware of this open door philosophy. They would have, without question, applied a great deal of custom work to harden this system. They would have built their own internal walls, added their own security checkpoints, and stationed their own guards inside this open plan library. They were, in effect, attempting to build a high-security bank vault inside the open, airy atrium of a modern greenhouse. But the Aurora operators were not taking any chances. They had not come this far to be stopped by a custom internal checkpoint. They had not just relied on the library's open design. The investigation revealed that the operators also possessed another unknown bug, another zero-day key. This one specifically for the Perforce system itself. This was the true measure of their preparation. They had a key, not for the browser, but for the library vault itself. This was their second, parallel, and secret path. If the front door was more guarded than they expected, if the custom security desks built by Google's engineers were too difficult to pass, they possessed a secret, unforgeable master key, a key that could, in theory, bypass all of this custom hardening, a key that the Perforce librarians themselves and even the original architects of the Perforce system did not know existed. They had in their hands two complete independent methods of entry. They could walk in the open door, or they could use their own secret one. Armed with this deep intimate knowledge of the library's layout and possessing at least two different powerful methods of access, the operators were successful. They moved through the internal network. They approached the perforce library. They gained access. They navigated the digital shelves to the blueprints they sought. Perhaps the source code for the Chrome browser. Perhaps the code for other, deeper core systems. And then they began to check out the books. They made copies, bundle by bundle, and quietly, over their invisible, encrypted tunnel, they transferred the digital blueprints out of the library and out of Google itself. The recipes were now in their possession. The second, and perhaps primary, objective had been achieved. But this was just one part of a much larger global event. The investigation, which had focused inward on the what, now began to look outward, searching for the who, the digital footprints. As investigators looked back at the event, at the digital pathways and the artifacts left behind, they began to see faint footprints. These were not the heavy, obvious tracks of a disruptive entry, but subtle, light impressions, like fingerprints on a glass, visible only when the light is just right. In the digital world, true, perfect anonymity is a difficult illusion to maintain. There is almost always a trace, a subtle style, a breadcrumb left behind. The investigation, which had begun with the what and the how, now turned to the far more complex, far more human puzzle of who. This was not a task for a single team or a single company. It became a quiet, global, collaborative effort. Security researchers from all the affected organizations and from independent laboratories began to pool their findings. They were like archaeologists from different museums, all of whom had found a similar, unknown pottery shard. By bringing their pieces together, they could begin to assemble the vessel, to see its shape, its style, and perhaps deduce the culture that had crafted it. The evidence was not a single, clear confession, not a signed note left at the scene. It was a collection of small, circumstantial, and technical clues. But when these clues were laid side by side, a clear, consistent, and logical pattern began to emerge. The researchers focused on three distinct categories of evidence: the motive, the infrastructure, and the code itself. The first clue, and in many ways the most human, was the motive. The operators' goals were specific. They had sought two things: the digital blueprints of source code and access to a very small, very specific list of Gmail accounts. The hunt for source code was an act of industrial or economic espionage, a clear and logical goal for any competitor or nation-state seeking a technical or financial edge. But the second goal, this was the more specific fingerprint. The operators had shown a profound, focused, and persistent interest in the private communications of a select group of Chinese human rights activists. This was not a random choice. This was not a financial target. This was not a military objective in the traditional sense. This was a goal of human intelligence, of social and political observation. It pointed to a specific, pre-existing, and geopolitical interest in the internal discussions, the external contacts, and the future plans of these particular individuals. An operator interested in credit card numbers would have been in a different part of the network. An operator interested in corporate merger plans would have been observing different executives. This specific, narrow, and unambiguous focus was the first clue. It was the clue of intent. It provided a why, and that why pointed in a very specific geographical and political direction. The second clue was one of infrastructure. This was the technical trace, the where. The Aurora program, the silent passenger, was not an independent entity. It was a tool, and like any tool, it had to be controlled. It had to communicate with its operators. The invisible, encrypted tunnels that it had opened, the tunnels that blended so perfectly with the normal hum of the network. They had to lead somewhere. Investigators began the slow, methodical process of tracing these tunnels. This is a complex art. Operators who wish to remain hidden do not connect directly from their own computers. They bounce their signal, routing it through a series of other intermediate computers all over the world. It is like a digital pinball machine, designed to make tracing the signal's origin a complex and time-consuming puzzle. The signal might jump from a server in Eastern Europe to one in South America, to another in Southeast Asia, all in the blink of an eye. But the investigators were patient. They began to peel back these layers, one by one. They were following the thread from server to server, backward through the maze, and eventually they found the termination points, the exit nodes, the servers that were acting as the final command and control points. These were the digital return addresses where the operators were sending their instructions. These servers were not located in a hidden, secret bunker. They were found to be on the networks of two specific, well-established and public institutions in China. The first was Shanghai Jiao Tong University, a major public research university, one of the oldest and most respected in the country. The second was the Langxiang Vocational School, a large and well-known technical college. This discovery was not, in itself, a final answer. It was another significant piece of the puzzle, but it was an ambiguous one. It did not mean the schools themselves were involved or even aware of the activity. It was, in effect, like tracing a mysterious letter back to a public postbox on a university campus. It does not mean the university's professors or its students or its administration sent the letter. It could mean that an outsider simply walked onto the open campus and used that public postbox, knowing it was a convenient, anonymous, and busy location. It could also mean that a computer on the campus, perhaps a student's, had been compromised and was being used as an unwitting relay. These were legitimate, respectable schools where students attended classes and researchers worked in libraries. The presence of the signal there was a powerful clue, but not a definitive one. It could, in theory, have been a false flag, a deliberately misleading clue left by a more clever operator, but it was a clue nonetheless, and it pointed in the same geographical direction as the motive. The third clue was perhaps the most technical and the most difficult to dispute. It was the signature found in the code itself. The Aurora program was custom-built. It was, in a sense, handmade. And just like a master painter or a writer, a programmer or a team of programmers has a unique style. They have habits, preferred techniques, preferred ways of solving small problems. A gate to their logic that is almost as unique as handwriting. As the researchers dissected the Aurora program, line by line, they found these small, stylistic tells. One of these was a checksum algorithm. A checksum is a small mathematical function, a piece of code used to verify that data has been transferred from one place to another without any errors. It is a digital seal on a package to prove it was not damaged in transit. There are countless ways to write such a function. The specific mathematical formula used in the Aurora code was not a common one. It was not the global textbook standard that most of the world used. It was, in fact, a specific regional algorithm, one known almost exclusively to be taught and used by programmers operating within China. This was a deep, intrinsic clue. This was not a false address. This was the digital equivalent of finding that the tool used to build a complex mechanism was fastened with a unique type of screw, a specific thread in the code that is only manufactured or commonly used in one specific region of the world. It was a fingerprint, not of a person, but of a process, of an education, of a community of practice. The researchers now had 3 distinct, independent clues: the motive, a deep geopolitical interest in Chinese activists; the infrastructure, digital exit points on the campuses of 2 Chinese universities; and the code, a digital signature, a programming style unique to that same region. Any one of these clues, in isolation, could have been explained away. It could have been a coincidence, a misdirection, a complex false flag. But when placed together, the 3 clues all pointed in the same direction. They all overlapped. They formed a clear, coherent, and logical pattern. This collection of clues led the global research community to a single, quiet conclusion. The Operation Aurora event had originated from operators working within China. This was no longer just a technical event. This was not the work of a few individuals, not a hacker in a basement. The scale, the sophistication, the patience, and the specific geopolitical goals all pointed toward an operation of a different magnitude. The data, the motive, and the source code all painted a picture of a new reality. And for Google, this quiet, technical, and logical conclusion would force a profound and very human reckoning. The View from 2005. To understand what happened next, to feel the true weight of the moment that was unfolding inside Google, we must turn the clock back. We must travel 5 years into the past, to the year 2005. This was a time of rapid, optimistic expansion. The digital world was growing, and Google's engineers and executives were looking at a new map, one defined not by land and sea, but by data and users. And on that map, one region represented the largest and perhaps most complex opportunity on the planet. This was mainland China. With the largest population in the world, it also had the fastest growing internet audience. It was a digital continent unto itself, a place where millions of new people were coming online for the first time every single month. For a company whose mission was to organize the world's information, to be absent from this market was to be incomplete. The desire to build a presence there was not just a commercial ambition. It was, for many, a core part of the mission. But there was a profound and fundamental challenge. The internet within China was not the same open, interconnected web that existed in much of the rest of the world. The government in Beijing maintained a sophisticated system of national content policies. This system, a vast digital border, was often described as the Great Firewall. This firewall, this series of technical filters, managed the flow of information between the domestic Chinese internet and the global web. And as part of this policy, many of the world's most popular websites were simply not accessible from within the country. Google's global site, Google.com was among them. It was, for most users in China, blocked and unavailable. There was only one path forward. To reach this audience, Google could not simply open a door in its existing digital city. It had to be invited in by the local government. And that invitation required building a new, separate, and fully independent version of its service, one that would live inside the digital border. This new service would be called Google.cn. This invitation was not a simple formality. It required a government-issued license to operate, and this license, after many long, complex, and delicate negotiations, came with a set of specific, non-negotiable conditions. The primary condition was this: the new local service, Google.cn, must comply with the nation's content policies. It must, in short, agree to filter its search results. This requirement, this single condition, ignited a profound, internal, philosophical debate within Google. It was a discussion that struck at the very heart of the company's identity. The official mission, the guiding star for every engineer and executive, was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. The word universally was key. The company's informal but equally famous motto was, "Don't be evil." Now, these two principles were in conflict. The government's filtering requirement created a paradox. It was as if a global library, whose core mission was to acquire and stock every book ever written, was being asked to open a new, massive branch, but only on the condition that it agree not to stock a specific list of books, a list provided by the local authorities. The debate inside the company was passionate, and it was deeply sincere on both sides. It was a question that pitted two core and competing principles against one another: the belief in the universal, unfiltered access to information, and the pragmatic, on-the-ground mission of serving the user, of providing a better tool, even if that tool had to be modified to fit the local landscape. One side of the debate argued that to participate in filtering, to agree to remove information, was a form of active compliance. It was a violation of the "Don't be evil" motto. It was a compromise of the central mission. The other side of the debate, the pragmatic side, argued with equal passion. Was it not better, they asked, for the Chinese people to have some access to a better, faster, and more relevant search engine, even a filtered one, than to have no access at all? Was it not a greater good to be present, to serve those millions of users, and to provide them with access to the 99% of the world's information that was not on the sensitive list? Was it not, in its own way, a form of evil to withhold a better tool from hundreds of millions of people, simply because of a philosophical disagreement over a small fraction of the content? After long and difficult discussions, the pragmatic view won. The decision was made. Google would, for the first time in its history, agree to create a search engine that filtered its own results in compliance with a local government's laws. The process was slow. The negotiations for the license were complex, taking another 18 long months. There were delays and moments when the entire project seemed to halt. But finally, in 2007, Google.cn came online. It was, by many measures, a success. Millions of people within China began to use it. The service was fast, it was accurate, and it was a clean, stable alternative to other local search engines. But the experience was different. For a user on Google.cn, a search for a sensitive topic, such as the Tiananmen Square protests, would not return the same page of historical photos and documents that a user in America or Europe would see. Instead, it would return no results at all. Or, at the very bottom of the page, a small, subtle, single line of text would appear. It read, "According to local law, regulations and policies, some search results are not shown." This was the compromise made visible. This was the uneasy but functional piece. The internal debate at Google had not disappeared. It had simply quieted down. The arrangement was not one that many executives felt happy about, but it was seen as the cost of entry, the necessary difficult step to participate in this vast and important digital landscape. Then came 2008. The world's gaze turned toward Beijing for the Summer Olympic Games. It was a moment of immense national pride and global attention. In the months leading up to this massive international event, the nature of the partnership began to change. The requests from local regulators, the list of terms to be filtered, began to increase. The topics on the list became broader, more general. This new development created fresh friction inside Google. Executives expressed their deep concerns to their counterparts in Beijing. But the prevailing belief, the internal assumption, was that this was a temporary measure. It was a logical, if difficult, tightening of content policies as the country prepared to host the entire world. The assumption was that after the athletes had gone home, after the global spotlight had moved on, these new, broader restrictions would be relaxed. The Olympics were a spectacular success. The closing ceremonies were held. The spotlight moved on. But the filtering requirements were not relaxed. In fact, in the months that followed, they were expanded once again. The lists of filtered terms grew even longer, the categories even broader, now including topics that had little to do with political stability, but more with general social mores. This was the state of affairs as 2009 began. The philosophical truce within Google was now under immense strain. The original, difficult compromise was one thing. This new, expanding set of requirements was another. The company was once again in a state of quiet, profound, and internal conflict about its own mission, about its very identity. This was the landscape. This was the delicate, strained, and deeply conflicted partnership that existed as the year drew to its close. It was into this already pressurized environment that the quiet, technical, and deeply symbolic event of Operation Aurora would land, not as a pebble, but as a profound and final weight. The "don't be evil" debate. When the Aurora incident was discovered, it acted as a catalyst. It was not just a technical breach, not just a matter of digital defense and repair. It was a symbolic event, a piece of stone dropped into a pool of water that was already under immense, quiet tension. The long simmering, deeply philosophical debate that had been happening inside Google for 5 years, the debate about its very presence in China, now came to a sudden, urgent, and unavoidable head. The time for quiet, internal conflict was over. A final decision had to be made. In the days and weeks that followed the discovery, a series of passionate, high-level, and closed-door meetings began. These were the new war rooms. But the topic was not just technical containment. The conversation had shifted from "how do we fix this" to "who are we?" The engineers had done their work, the system was being cleansed. But the meaning of the event now hung in the air, demanding interpretation. The most senior executives of the company, the architects of its global strategy and the guardians of its corporate soul, were now in a state of profound deliberation. The debate quickly focused, crystallizing around two distinct and deeply held points of view. These two views were personified by the company's most senior leadership. On one side was the view of the co-founder, Sergey Brin. For him, the company's informal motto, the six-letter phrase, "Don't be evil," was not a public relations slogan. It was a foundational engineering principle. It was a core part of the company's operating system. The Aurora event, he felt, was not just a breach. It was a profound violation of trust, and it threw the company's existing difficult compromise into a harsh, new light. His concern was not just that Google had been observed, it was the nature of that observation. The operators had specifically targeted the private accounts of human rights activists. This, for Sergey, was the critical detail. Here was Google, a company that, on one hand, was actively complying with government requests to filter information, to remove the very topics these activists wrote about. And now, on the other hand, it appeared that same government was simultaneously and silently moving within Google's own systems to observe those very activists. To him, the two events were now inextricably linked. The company was caught, not just in a technical compromise, but in a moral one. The act of filtering and the act of being used as a platform for surveillance. It had crossed a line. He argued with deep conviction that to continue this partnership, to continue operating Google.cn under these conditions, was to be complicit. It was a violation of the company's most fundamental principle. The company, he felt, was, in fact, being evil. On the other side of this debate was the pragmatic view championed by the executive chairman, Eric Schmidt. His was the perspective of a global statesman, the leader of a vast multinational corporation that was now a significant player on the world stage. He argued with equal conviction that the world is a complex and imperfect place. To operate on a global scale, he reasoned, is to accept that you must, by definition, comply with the local laws of the countries you operate in. This was not a new or unique challenge. Google, he pointed out, complied with local laws in every country. It removed specific, illegal content in Germany. It responded to court orders in the United States. And in China, the local law required filtering. This was, he argued, simply the non-negotiable cost of doing business. The price of admission to serve hundreds of millions of people. His argument was one of the greater good. Was it not better to be present, to give those hundreds of millions of Chinese users a faster, cleaner, more reliable tool, even if it was partially filtered? Was it not better for them to have access to the 99% of the world's information that wasn't on the sensitive list? To pull out, he argued, would be to abandon the field entirely. It would cede the entire digital landscape to local competitors, services which were far more heavily filtered and which operated with no transparency at all. Was that not the worst outcome? This was the profound philosophical impasse. The idealist's mission versus the pragmatist's choice. It was a debate, not of right versus wrong, but of two competing, valid principles. And for nearly 4 months, from the winter of 2009 into the spring of 2010, the company existed in this state of quiet, suspended deliberation. The tipping point finally came. Larry Page, the other co-founder, the quiet, brilliant engineering mind who had long been the partner to Sergey's vision, weighed the two arguments. He, too, had built the company on those core principles. He, too, saw the Aurora event as more than just a technical problem. The breach, he felt, had fundamentally changed the equation. It had broken the already strained trust. The partnership, however it was defined, was no longer tenable. He sided with Sergey. With the two co-founders in alignment, the debate was over. The decision was made, and it was one of the most significant and costly decisions in the company's history. Google would stop censoring its search results in China. It would, in effect, shut down the google.cn website. It would walk away from the largest internet market in the world. The mechanics of this decision were as symbolic as the decision itself. They would not simply turn off the servers and go dark. Instead, they would redirect all traffic. Any user in mainland China who typed google.cn into their browser would be automatically and seamlessly forwarded to google.com.hk. This was Google's Hong Kong-based site. Hong Kong, operating under the One Country, Two Systems policy, had a different legal framework. It had a different relationship with the internet. And critically, it did not require the filtering of search results. This was the elegant engineering solution to a profound philosophical problem. It was an act of quiet defiance. For a brief new period, users in mainland China who went to their familiar search page were suddenly, and perhaps for the first time, able to see the unfiltered results. They could search for any topic, and the full global index of information was returned to them. But this decision, made in the quiet, high-level meetings in California, would land with a seismic shock on the other side of the world. For the local Chinese employees of Google, the ones who had worked for years to build and maintain the Google.acn service, the news did not come as a respectful internal discussion. It arrived suddenly at 6 o'clock in the morning, Beijing time. It came as a company-wide memo, an electronic broadcast from a distant headquarters. Employees woke up, not to their alarms, but to a flurry of panicked, confused phone calls and messages from their colleagues. They flooded into the Beijing offices, seeking answers, seeking clarity, worried about their projects, their careers, their futures. But the local managers had no answers. They were just as adrift. In a gesture of profound, almost cinematic disconnect, the panicked, confused, and worried employees were told to leave the office for the day. They were all given tickets to go see a movie, the new, immersive, blockbuster film, Avatar, which had just been released. The next day, the employees returned to the office, and a company-wide teleconference was arranged. Sergey Brin himself spoke to the entire Chinese staff, attempting to explain the philosophical, moral reasoning behind the decision. The call did not go well. It was, by all accounts, fraught and emotional. The local employees felt, understandably, like they were the collateral damage of a high-level philosophical war that they had no part in. They had believed in their local mission, in the value of the tool they were building. Now, they felt that their work and their futures had been sacrificed by generals an ocean away in a battle of ideals that felt very distant from their own daily lives. The decision was final. The digital bridge that Google had spent 5 difficult years building, the bridge that was meant to connect two worlds, had been deliberately and philosophically dismantled. And as the employees in Beijing process this new reality, the full consequences of the decision were just beginning to unfold. The Elderwood legacy, the story of Aurora as the world knew it, had drawn to a close. Google had made its profound philosophical decision, and the public conversation had shifted to the new, fractured relationship between a digital giant and a global superpower. The digital bridge had been drawn, but for the quiet, interconnected community of security researchers, the work was only just beginning. The event was not an ending, it was a discovery. It was the first clear sighting of a new and extraordinarily sophisticated presence. They now possessed the digital signature, the unique, complex handwriting of this group. And with this new knowledge, they began to see that signature appearing elsewhere. The first task for this community was to agree on a name. Operation Aurora described the event, the incident of that winter. But the researchers needed a name for the artists themselves, the operators, the group that had demonstrated such patience and capability. As different security firms published their own independent analyses of the custom tools, different names began to emerge. They were like digital art historians, each discovering a new, previously unknown master painter, and each giving that painter a different title. The firm Dell, in their research, labeled the group the Beijing Group, a name that was direct and pointed to their analysis of its origin. The firm CrowdStrike, known for its evocative naming conventions, called them Sneaky Panda. But it was the researchers at Symantec who, in their deep, methodical dissection of the code, found a small internal clue. It was a variable, a simple internal label the programmers had used for a piece of their own code. The label was a single, simple word, Elderwood. This name felt appropriate. It was subtle, organic, and mysterious. It became the name that many in the community would adopt. This was the Elderwood Group. With a name and a clear, detailed portfolio of their brushstrokes, the researchers could now begin the real work. They could build a dossier. This file would contain every known tool, every known technique, every known digital address that the Elderwood Group had ever used. It was a collection of their habits, the specific checksum algorithm they preferred, the way they structured their invisible tunnels, the unique methods they used to hide their presence, and the zero-day keys they were known to possess. This dossier was a new lens, and with this lens, the researchers began to look back at other unexplained incidents from the past. And they began to look forward at the new, unexplained events that were happening every day. They were hunting for a match. They were no longer looking for a single event. They were looking for the artist. The connections began to appear. In the 3 years that followed the initial discovery of Aurora, the researchers were able to link the Elderwood Group to at least 7 more distinct major campaigns. Each of these campaigns, in turn, involved the quiet, methodical observation of numerous other companies and organizations. The trail was not cold, it was active. The artists were prolific. But it was the very next campaign, the first major operation they conducted after the Aurora event, that provided the most profound and most clarifying moment of discovery. It was the moment the researchers' theory was confirmed. The moment the full circular logic of the group's strategy became clear. In this new operation, researchers observed the Elderwood Group using a new zero-day key. It was a key not for Internet Explorer, but for a different and equally widespread piece of software, Adobe Flash. Adobe Flash was, at the time, the engine of the interactive internet. It was the program that ran the videos, the advertisements, the animated menus, and the games on millions of websites. A zero-day key for Adobe Flash was an extraordinarily powerful tool. It meant you could gain access to a computer, not by sending a crafted email, but simply by waiting for a person to visit a website, any website, that had been prepared with this special, invisible code. This discovery was the click in the minds of the researchers. It was the moment the entire puzzle locked into place. They paused, and they remembered the original Aurora event. They remembered the two objectives. The first was the observation of the human rights activists. The second, and perhaps more significant, was the copying of the digital blueprints, the source code. And from which company had they copied a massive, invaluable library of source code? Adobe. This was the full circle moment. The connection was no longer a theory. It was a clear, logical, and observable fact. The Elderwood Group had, during the Aurora event, broken into the lock factory, the Adobe Corporation. They had quietly, patiently copied the master blueprints for Adobe's most important products, including Flash. They had then returned to their own quiet workshops, far from view, and there, with the original, secret architectural plans in their hands, they had begun their patient work. They had studied the blueprints. They had analyzed every mechanism, every complex interaction. They had found the small, subtle, and unintended flaws in the design, the flaws the original architects themselves had never seen. And from these flaws, they had begun to manufacture their own keys. This was the payoff. This was the why. The espionage was not just about replication, not just about building a competing product. It was about exploitation. It was about acquiring the intellectual property they needed to become a self-sufficient, self-sustaining keymaker. They were fueling their own operations. They had turned the digital arms race into a perfect, sustainable, closed loop. They stole the plans to build the keys, which allowed them to steal more plans to build more keys. And they were not just building one. Researchers watched with a kind of quiet awe as the Elderwood Group began to deploy these new keys. They did not just have one. They seemed to have an endless supply. In the months that followed, they were observed using 5 distinct, previously unknown zero-day keys for Adobe Flash alone. To find one 0 day is a matter of profound skill, or immense luck, or great wealth. To deploy 5 of them, one after another, was not the signature of a group. It was the signature of an institution. It implied a team of dozens, perhaps hundreds, of researchers. It implied a level of funding and state-level organization that was almost unheard of in the public, commercial world. The true scale of their capability was captured in a single, quiet statistic. In the entire year of 2011, security researchers around the world recorded only 8 major public incidents that were known to be based on a zero-day key. Just 8. Of those 8, 4 were attributed to the Elderwood Group. This simple, sober fact was staggering. It meant that this single, newly identified entity, this workshop, was responsible for half of the world's most sophisticated, most advanced, and most priceless digital operations. They were not just participating in this new, silent arms race. They were, in many ways, dominating it. The digital historians had found their master painter, but they had discovered this was not a painter from the past, not a historical artifact to be studied. It was a living, breathing, and extraordinarily prolific workshop, one that was actively creating a new generation of perfect, unseen tools, and quietly, methodically, changing the very landscape they were all trying to map: the watering hole. In the years that followed, the Elderwood Group's methods evolved. Their artistry, once defined by the single, perfectly crafted invitation, now shifted. They no longer needed to send individual, bespoke messages. They had learned a new, more patient, and perhaps more efficient form of observation. They had moved from the focused work of the artisan to the grand, patient strategy of the master. This new method had a name, one borrowed from the timeless rhythms of the natural world. It was called the watering hole approach. The logic was simple and profound. The hunter, who had once spent days meticulously tracking a single, specific animal through the vast wilderness, had changed their nature. The hunter had, in effect, become the lion. The lion does not track. The lion does not chase. The lion simply finds the one place in the savannah that all the animals must, in the course of their normal daily lives, eventually visit: the watering hole. And there, hidden in the tall grass, the lion simply waits. In the digital world, these watering holes were not pools of water. They were websites. They were the digital gathering places for specific, defined communities. They were the popular, trusted online forums where engineers discussed new ideas. They were the news sites where an entire industry got its daily information. They were the non-profit homepages that a specific community of activists relied upon and trusted. The Elderwood operators, with their new, self-made arsenal of zero-day keys, would find one of these trusted sites. They would not disrupt it, not deface it, not shut it down. They would, with the same surgical quiet they had always used, simply plant their invisible tool, their silent passenger, within the website's own code. The website would look the same. It would function the same. It would be just as fast and reliable as it had been the day before. It was, in all respects, perfectly normal, except that it now had a silent, invisible observer waiting in the digital grass. The operators would then simply wait. They knew that their targets, the very people they wished to observe, would eventually visit this site. It was part of their daily routine. An engineer at a defense company would visit their trusted industry news site to read the morning's headlines. A human rights activist would visit their community's homepage to check for updates. And as these individuals arrived at the trusted watering hole to take a drink of information, the website itself would, in that silent, seamless instant, pass the silent passenger to their computer. There was no link to click. There was no invitation to accept. The act of visiting the trusted site was the only requirement. The trust that the community had in its own digital gathering place. That trust itself was the mechanism of entry. This new method was used with devastating precision. The new targets of the Elderwood Group were specific. They were still interested in human rights organizations. Researchers found that a zero-day key, one of the new ones from the Adobe Flash blueprints, had been placed on the website for Amnesty International in Hong Kong. The logic was clear. The people who would visit this specific regional website were, by definition, the very people the operators were interested in. They were self-selecting. By visiting this page, they were, in effect, raising their hand, identifying themselves as a person of interest. But the group's focus had also expanded, turning toward a much more difficult and much more valuable set of targets: the Western defense industry. These were the pillars of national security, companies like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and Boeing. These were the digital fortresses, the campuses that had the highest, thickest, and most well-guarded walls in the world. A direct, crafted invitation was unlikely to work. The watering hole approach was more effective. They were able to place their tools on sites like the Center for Defense Information, a non-profit organization that posts analysis on military matters. The people who frequented that site were precisely the military personnel, the researchers, and the contractors who worked inside the fortresses. But even this was not the final evolution. As the researchers mapped this new behavior, they saw the emergence of an even more sophisticated, more patient, and more powerful strategy. It was known as the supply chain incident. The operators looked at the great fortresses, the large defense contractors, and understood that even with their new keys, a direct entry was difficult, and it was loud. It created noise and risked discovery. They decided to stop trying to scale the high outer wall. Instead, they began to study the fortress's behavior. They watched the small, unmarked delivery trucks that were waved through the main gate every single day. They realized the fortress did not build everything itself. It had suppliers, hundreds of them. Small, often anonymous, third-party companies that provided all the small, necessary components for the larger mission. A small company in a quiet office park that wrote a simple, unclassified piece of software for managing inventory. A small firm that manufactured a specific, simple electronic part. These small companies were trusted partners. Their products, their deliveries were expected. They were part of the ecosystem, and they did not have the same billion-dollar security budgets as the fortress. The operators' new logic was to bypass the fortress entirely, and instead to gain access to the small, trusted supplier. They would use their tools to enter this small, undefended third-party company. They would not disrupt its business. They would not steal its money. They would do only one thing. They would find the digital blueprint for that company's own simple product, the inventory software, or the chip design. And to that legitimate blueprint, they would add just one tiny, extra, invisible component, their own silent passenger. The small company, completely unaware, would continue its work. It would build its software, it would manufacture its chip, and it would, in the course of its normal, trusted business, ship that product to its high-security client, the defense contractor. The delivery would arrive at the fortress's main gate. The guards would see the trusted name of the supplier. The paperwork would be in order. The digital signature on the software would be correct. The package would be waved through. And in that moment, the silent passenger was not just inside the fortress. It had been personally escorted in through the front door by the fortress's own trusted partners. This was the ultimate evolution of patience. It was the long game, a strategy that could take months or even years to unfold. The scale of this, the sheer number of people required to sustain such an operation, was difficult to comprehend. There was not one Elderwood group. There was an institution. There were teams of researchers combing through the stolen blueprints from Google, from Adobe, from countless others, hunting for the next zero-day flaw. There were teams of developers turning those flaws into stable, reliable tools. There were teams of digital anthropologists studying the social maps of entire industries, choosing the targets, finding the watering holes, and identifying the weakest link in the supply chain. And then there were the operators themselves, the hands-on teams, conducting the missions, navigating the internal networks, and finally, the analysts, waiting to receive and interpret the vast, quiet flow of copied data. This was the legacy of Aurora. This was the new normal. This hidden digital world, once the quiet, abstract domain of engineers and academics, had now, finally and irreversibly, risen to the surface. It had become a formal matter of global presidential policy. In 2015, the President of the United States, Barack Obama, met with the President of China, Xi Jinping. They stood side by side on the White House lawn, and they spoke to the world. Their topic was not just trade, not just territory, not just the traditional levers of power. They spoke of this new, invisible domain. They announced that their two countries had reached a common understanding. They agreed that neither government would conduct or knowingly support cyber-enabled theft of intellectual property for commercial advantage. It was a truce. It was a rule of the road for a road that had, until then, been unmapped. It was the first formal public acknowledgement that this silent digital chess game was being played at a global scale. The game, of course, does not end. The agreement was a set of rules for one part of the board. But the game itself, the quiet, patient observation, the hunt for information, the building of tools, and the search for unseen doors, this is now a permanent and fundamental part of our modern world. It is a new, invisible layer of human interaction, a silent, perpetual contest of ghosts in the wire, a quiet, strategic dance that continues even now in the deep, humming, digital heart of the sleeping world. Our journey through these 15 chapters, these quiet vignettes of the invisible world, has now come to a close. We have traveled from the humming, digital city of Google to the patient, methodical workshops of the Elderwood Group. We have observed the crafting of a perfect digital invitation, and we have stood in the silent, open-door library where the blueprints of our modern world are kept. We have followed the logic, the motive, and the human philosophy that guided these quiet, profound events. And now, we can pull the lens back. We can zoom out from the individual trees to the entire sleeping forest. We can step away from the specific branching pathways and look at the whole, vast and intricate map. What we see is not a collection of isolated stories. It is a glimpse into a new kind of landscape, a new and fundamental layer of our reality, one that is as vast, as deep, and as full of hidden life as the ocean itself. We live our lives on the surface of this new digital ocean. We see the sunlight on the waves. We check our messages, we read the news, we watch a film. We feel the gentle, predictable currents of our daily digital lives. We are, in a sense, living on a calm, sunlit coast, unaware of the sheer, profound depth just beyond our shore. The stories we have just heard, these are dispatches from that depth. They are the field notes from the digital abyss. Down in those quiet, crushing depths, far from the light of our daily screens, a different world exists, It is a world of immense, unseen currents, the massive, global flows of data that shape our economies and our politics in ways we may never fully perceive. In this deep, dark, and silent world, there are strange and intricate forms of life. The Aurora program, the Elderwood tools. These are like the bioluminescent creatures of the deep sea. They are custom-built, perfectly adapted to their unique, high-pressure environment. They move in silence. They hunt with a patience that is almost geological, and they operate by a set of rules that are entirely their own. And in this deep, there are the archaeologists, the botanists, the researchers we have followed. These are the deep-sea explorers, the ones who descend in their reinforced submersibles, their digital sandboxes, to find, to classify, and to understand these new forms of life. They are the ones who find the digital shipwrecks, the traces of these quiet, passing leviathans, and they patiently, meticulously reconstruct the story of what happened in the dark. This deep, silent ocean of data is not separate from our world. It is beneath it. It is the foundation upon which our surface world is built. The undersea cables that connect our continents are the tangible proof of this new, vast, and interconnected reality. The humming, climate-controlled data centers, each one the size of a city block, are the hydrothermal vents of this new ocean. The places where the raw, superheated energy of information rises up to fuel the entire global ecosystem. To fear this ocean is to fear the depth of the sea itself. It is not a place of malice. It is a place of complexity. It is a vast, new, and neutral territory, a new and sprawling wilderness. And like any wilderness, it has its own logic, its own predators, and its own profound, hidden beauty. The ingenuity that crafted the Aurora key is, in its own way, as complex and intricate as the system it was designed to open. But perhaps the most important lesson from this deep digital ocean is that it is not, in the end, an alien one. For all of this talk of code, of servers, of algorithms and 0 days, the threads we found, the common element in every single one of these 15 stories, was not one of circuits, but of humanity. This entire, vast and complex digital landscape is, in the end, a human creation. It is a mirror, a perfect, logical, and often unforgiving reflection of our own nature. The digital world is not a place. It is a conversation. It is a relationship. And these stories have shown us that this relationship is built on the same timeless human foundations as the physical world. The Aurora event, in its final moment, was not a technical problem. It was a philosophical one. The debate inside Google, the don't be evil debate, was not about firewalls or patches. It was a human conversation about values. It was a discussion of right and wrong, of compromise and principle. It was a story about a company, a group of people, trying to decide what kind of citizens they wanted to be in this new global landscape they themselves had helped to build. The initial entry point, the digital invitation, was not a failure of technology. It was a masterpiece of human understanding. It was a forgery, not of code, but of a relationship. The operators had succeeded because they had first, patiently, studied the maps of human trust. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, that the digital world runs on this simple, ancient, and invisible currency. They knew who trusted whom, the language they used, the casual way they would ask for a file. The entire multi-million-dollar operation, with all its priceless secret keys, was, in its first critical moment, entirely social. Even the operators themselves, the ghosts in the wire, left their own small human fingerprints. The name Aurora. It was not a string of random numbers. It was a word chosen by a person or a team of people to name their project. It was a word that suggested the dawn or the northern lights, a word of beauty, of nature. It was a small, poetic fossil, a reminder that on the other side of the screen, there was not a machine, but a mind. The name Elderwood, found in the code, again, a human label. The researchers who found it became historians, artists, classifying the brushstrokes of this new workshop. This too is a human act, the act of naming, of classifying, of turning the abstract into the known. These digital events are not cold, logical, and technical. They are the new, modern stage for the same ancient human dramas. They are stories of trust and deception. They are stories of ingenuity and hubris. They are stories of motive, of politics, of philosophy, and of profit. The digital world has not changed what we are. It has only given us a new, infinitely complex and invisible place to be it. And as we have traveled, we have had to speak in a new language, a language of metaphor. This too is a deeply human act. The digital world, in its true form, is formless. It is an ocean of pure, abstract logic. It is a world of ones and zeros, of electrical impulses moving at the speed of light. It is a place that our minds, which are built to understand the physical world of trees and rivers and lions and stones, cannot easily grasp. And so, to tell these stories, to make them tangible, we have had to build bridges. We have had to create a new map of metaphors. We spoke of a digital city, a campus tended by architects and gardeners. This gave us a sense of scale, of complexity, of a living, managed system. We spoke of an invitation, a forged letter, to understand the nature of trust. We spoke of an unseen door and a secret key to understand the priceless hidden value of a 0 day. We spoke of a silent passenger to understand how a program could reside on a system, not as a vandal, but as an observer. We spoke of a library, an open-door philosophy, of master blueprints and recipes, to understand the immense intellectual value of source code. And finally, we spoke of a watering hole and the patient lion, to understand the evolution of a strategy, a shift from the spear to the net. These metaphors are not just a convenience. They are the handles that our minds must create to hold on to these abstract, powerful concepts. They are the pictures we must paint. They are the way we translate the logic of the machine back into the language of the human heart. This, in itself, is a quiet, powerful, and deeply human process. It is the act of understanding. It is the act of making the unknown known. And what have we come to know? We have come to know that this digital landscape is in a state of constant, quiet, and rhythmic change. We have called it, at times, a digital arms race or a silent chess game. But perhaps a more gentle and more accurate metaphor is that of a river. The landscape of the digital world is like a vast, flat plain. The operators, the water, are always flowing. They are always seeking the path of least resistance, the lowest point, the easiest way to move from here to there. The defenders, the engineers, and the security teams are the ones who are constantly monitoring this landscape. When they see a new channel being carved by the water, a zero-day key being used. They respond, they come, and they build a dam. They fill the channel, they release a patch, and the water, the operators, undeterred, simply pull and wait. And then, with that same inevitable geological patience, they find a new channel. They find a new, undiscovered, low-lying piece of ground, and they begin to flow again. This process is not one of good or evil. It is, in a sense, a natural one. It is a rhythm. It is a process of constant, neutral, and inevitable evolution. A lock is built, a key is made, a wall is built, a new door is found. This is the quiet, hidden weather of our modern world. It is the new, deep, and fundamental pulse of the 21st century. This, then, is the new landscape. It is not a world to be feared. It is a world to be understood, to be observed, and in the end, to be accepted. It is the new, invisible background noise of our modern lives. It is the gentle, electronic hum of the server in a distant, refrigerated building. It is the faint, silent light of the fiber optic cables, the digital arteries that run beneath our feet, beneath the cold, dark, and quiet oceans, connecting us all one to another. The digital world is a human world. It is a world of complexity, of ingenuity, of motive, and of trust. It is a world that is vast and quiet and deep, and it is a world that is humming all around us, even now as we rest. It is a world that is a part of our own, and like the stars in the night sky or the slow, rhythmic tide of the sea, its complex, silent, and distant movements are a part of the vast, quiet, and peaceful universe in which it is, at last, safe to sleep. This journey of understanding, of pulling back the curtain on the invisible, is one that we will continue. The digital world is always flowing, and new stories, new paths, and new puzzles are appearing every day. If these stories have provided a sense of calm, a point of quiet focus for your mind in the late hours, we hope you will follow or subscribe to this channel. And perhaps, if you know someone else who is seeking a quiet port in the digital storm, a place of calm and curious stories, we hope you will share this journey with them. But for now, there is only the quiet. The story is told, the journey is complete, and it is time to sleep.